No one on the crowded Boston City bus paid any attention to the exhausted man sitting quietly by the window. His expensive coat was soaked by the rain, his eyes hollow with a weariness that seemed far older than the day itself. Everyone looked away, except one struggling librarian carrying 2 bags of groceries and a stack of children's books. Without saying much, Amelia Brooks unwrapped the only turkey sandwich she had planned to eat after working 2 jobs. Then she gently tore it in half and held one piece out to the stranger. "You look like you need this more than I do." He hesitated before accepting it. What Amelia didn't know was that the quiet man beside her controlled an empire powerful enough to frighten politicians, billionaires, and criminals alike. And somewhere on that same bus, someone had already been promised a fortune to make sure he never reached tomorrow. Rain streaked across the windows as a crowded Boston City bus crawled through evening traffic. Most passengers buried themselves in phones or stared blankly outside, eager to get home after another exhausting day. Amelia Brooks shifted the heavy canvas bag resting on her lap before it slipped to the floor. Inside were groceries, nearly a dozen children's library books waiting to be repaired before Monday, and a bundle of handmade bookmarks created by the children she worked with. Her phone vibrated. "Did you remember we're almost out of cereal?" Noah texted. Amelia smiled despite her fatigue. "I did. Check the grocery bag when I get home." His reply came seconds later. "You're the best, Aunt Amy." That simple message made every extra shift at the neighborhood bookstore worthwhile. Since her sister and brother-in-law had died 4 years earlier, Amelia had become Noah's legal guardian. Every paycheck disappeared into rent, groceries, school supplies, and overdue bills. Even so, she had never regretted choosing family over comfort. Across the aisle sat a man unlike anyone else on the bus. His expensive black coat was soaked from the rain, yet he carried himself with quiet confidence. He spoke to no one, never looked at his phone, and seemed strangely alert, as though he instinctively noticed every movement around him. Amelia assumed he was simply another businessman having a terrible day. When the bus stopped near Back Bay Station, an elderly woman struggled to lift a folding shopping cart onto the first step. Before anyone else reacted, Amelia stood, helped her inside, and returned to her seat with a warm smile. The stranger watched the entire exchange. A few minutes later, a quiet rumble broke the silence. His stomach. He shifted uncomfortably, clearly hoping no one had noticed. Amelia glanced down at the turkey sandwich she had packed for dinner after a 12-hour workday. It was the only meal she had until she got home. Then she looked back at the exhausted stranger. Without overthinking it, she carefully broke the sandwich into 2 equal halves. "Excuse me," she said softly. He looked up. "I think you need this more than I do." For a moment, he simply stared at her. "I'm all right." She smiled gently. "I don't think you are." He hesitated before asking quietly, "Why would you give your dinner to someone you don't even know?" Amelia shrugged. "My mother always said that kindness means the most when it's offered to someone who can't repay you." She held the sandwich out again. "So, please." Slowly, he accepted it. "Thank you." "You're welcome." Neither of them spoke again for the rest of the ride. Around them, passengers remained absorbed in their own lives, completely unaware that they had just witnessed a moment that would change 2 futures forever. The quiet stranger wasn't an ordinary businessman. He was Damian Moretti, the hidden ruler of one of the most powerful criminal empires on the East Coast, a man feared by politicians, billionaires, and rival syndicates alike. For decades, people had offered him fortunes, loyalty, and expensive gifts, always expecting something in return. No one had ever offered him half of their only meal. When the bus reached downtown, Damian stepped into the rain without revealing who he was. Back inside his penthouse overlooking Boston Harbor, the city lights stretched endlessly beyond the glass, but his thoughts remained on the woman from the bus. He reached into his coat pocket and carefully unfolded the paper napkin that had wrapped half of the sandwich. It was an ordinary napkin, yet somehow it felt more valuable than gifts worth millions. A knock interrupted the silence. "Come in." His longtime advisor, Adrian Keller, entered carrying a confidential report. "We confirmed the attack wasn't random," Adrian said. "Someone inside the organization is moving money through offshore accounts." Damien remained calm. "We continue watching everyone. No arrests? Not until we know the whole conspiracy." Adrian nodded. That answer was exactly what he expected from the man who never acted without certainty. As Adrian turned to leave, Damien spoke again. "I need information on someone. A business partner? A woman?" The request surprised Adrian more than any intelligence report. Damien described the librarian from the bus, her worn winter coat, the children's books she carried, and even the nephew who had appeared on her phone screen. "I want facts," Damien said quietly. Nothing more. Less than 24 hours later, he would receive a report that changed far more than he expected. And without realizing it, Amelia Brooks had already become the only person capable of reaching the man hidden behind the legend of Damien Moretti. The report arrived on Damien Moretti's desk the following afternoon. He had intended to skim through it in a few minutes. Instead, he spent nearly an hour reading every page. Name: Amelia Brooks. Age: 30. Occupation: Children's Services Librarian at the Boston Public Library. She also worked 3 evenings each week at a neighborhood bookstore to make ends meet. Damien frowned at the income listed in the report. It barely covered rent, utilities, and groceries. Yet she had never missed a payment for Noah's school or medical insurance. The next pages explained why. 4 years earlier, Amelia's older sister and brother-in-law had died in a car accident, leaving behind a frightened 8-year-old boy. Without hesitation, Amelia had accepted legal guardianship, sacrificing nearly everything she had planned for her own future. The report continued. No criminal record, no lawsuits, no political connections, only mounting student loans, overdue utility bills, and a credit card balance that seemed impossible to repay. Then Damien reached a section titled Volunteer Activities. Every Saturday morning, Amelia read stories to children at Boston Children's Hospital without accepting payment. She repaired damaged library books after work because replacing them was too expensive. More than once, she had quietly paid overdue library fines for struggling families with her own money. Adrian watched Damien close the folder. Our investigators interviewed several neighbors, and they all said the same thing. Damien looked up. If someone nearby needed help, Amelia always found a way, even when she barely had enough for herself. The office fell silent. Damien had spent his life believing generosity usually came with conditions. Yet everything he had learned about Amelia pointed in the opposite direction. For reasons he couldn't explain, he wanted to know whether the woman from the bus was truly the same person described in the report. Across town, Amelia's morning looked much like every other. "Aunt Amy, you're going to miss the bus," Noah called from the kitchen. "I'm not. You've got less than a minute." She laughed while grabbing her scarf. "You sound like an old man." "You made me responsible." She walked over and straightened his backpack. "Homework before video games." "I know. And lock the door after school." "I know." She smiled, ruffled his hair, and hurried out the door. Before leaving, she glanced at the unpaid bills lying inside the kitchen drawer. She did the math one more time. The numbers never changed. There still wasn't enough. With a quiet sigh, she closed the drawer and headed to work. The children waiting for story hour deserved her full attention, not her worries. Later that afternoon, Damien stood across the street from the Boston Public Library.
He had no meeting nearby, no business reason to be there. He simply found himself watching the entrance. A few minutes later, Amelia walked outside, carrying 2 large boxes of donated children's books. A little girl struggled to lift one side. "Let me help," Amelia said, taking most of the weight without hesitation. "You don't have to carry all of it," the girl said. "I know." "Then why are you?" Amelia smiled. "Because someday you'll help carry something heavy for someone else." The little girl nodded thoughtfully. "I think I will. I believe you." From across the street, Damien watched the brief exchange. It lasted less than a minute. Yet somehow, Amelia had managed to teach a lesson no business school or leadership seminar ever could. He remained where he was until she disappeared back inside the library. Only then did he return to his waiting car. That evening, reality pulled him back into the world he knew. Inside Moretti headquarters, senior executives gathered around the polished conference table. Among them sat Victor Romano, Damien's trusted underboss of 8 years. Victor noticed the change almost immediately. "You've postponed several meetings recently." "I've postponed them," Damien corrected calmly. "Not cancelled." Victor offered a polite smile, but his eyes lingered on Damien a little longer than usual. After the meeting ended, he quietly called one of his captains aside. "Find out where the boss has been spending his mornings." "You think something's wrong?" Victor's expression hardened. Damien Moretti has survived because he never lets emotions interfere with business. He glanced toward the closed conference room. "If that has changed," a cold smile crossed his face, "then someone has finally found his weakness." Victor still didn't know Amelia Brooks's name, but he had already decided to find it. And once he did, the quiet librarian who had unknowingly touched the heart of the East Coast's most feared man would become the center of a conspiracy far more dangerous than she could possibly imagine.
Over the next several weeks, Damien Moretti developed a routine that would have sounded impossible to anyone who knew him. Every Tuesday and Thursday morning, he visited the Boston Public Library under a different name. Sometimes he introduced himself as Daniel Moore, a shipping consultant between meetings. Other times, he claimed to be a freelance writer looking for a quiet place to work. No one questioned him, least of all Amelia. To her, he was simply a polite regular who enjoyed history books and always returned them on time. For Damien, those visits became the calmest hours of his week. Inside the library, no one feared him. No one waited nervously for instructions. No one cared how much money he controlled or how many powerful people answered to his name. For the first time in decades, he could simply exist. One rainy afternoon, he sat near the children's reading room with an open magazine resting on the table in front of him. In reality, he barely read a single page. His attention remained fixed on Amelia. Nearly 20 children sat in a circle around her. She wasn't merely reading a story. She brought every character to life. The children laughed, leaned forward, and eagerly guessed what would happen next. For 40 minutes, worries about school, family, or money disappeared. There were only stories, imagination, and the woman who somehow made every child feel important. When story hour ended, the children crowded around her, each wanting to tell her something before going home. Damien couldn't remember the last time he had seen someone create so much happiness without asking for anything in return. As the room gradually emptied, one young boy remained near the circulation desk. He clutched the straps of his worn backpack and avoided looking anyone in the eye. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the volunteer librarian. "I lost my library book." The volunteer checked the computer. "The replacement fee is $28. The boy lowered his head. "My mum can't pay until next month." "I'm sorry," the volunteer replied sympathetically. Those are the rules. The boy nodded and turned toward the exit. Before he reached the door, Amelia called softly, "Ben!" He stopped. She walked over and knelt until they were at eye level. "I think my computer made a mistake yesterday." The boy looked confused. "What do you mean? It says your replacement fee has already been paid." His eyes widened. "But I wasn't here yesterday." Amelia smiled. "Then let's pretend my computer wanted to surprise both of us." The boy stared at her for a moment, before realizing what she had done. "So, I can still borrow books. I'd be disappointed if you didn't." His face lit up. "Thank you, Miss Brooks." After he left, Damien quietly approached the desk. "You paid the fee yourself." Amelia shrugged as she arranged a stack of books. It wasn't much. It mattered to him. "That's enough." Damien studied her for a moment. "I happen to know $28 isn't a small amount for you." She looked at him with mild surprise. "I've spent money on less important things." "Why help him?" She glanced toward the door where Ben had disappeared. "Because children remember kindness much longer than they remember embarrassment." The answer lingered in Damien's mind long after the conversation ended. A week later, Damien visited again. This time the library buzzed with middle school students finishing homework after classes. Near one of the windows, 3 older boys surrounded a younger girl, reading quietly by herself. "Still reading fairy tales?" One of them mocked. Another snatched the book from her hands. The girl looked ready to cry. Before Damien could stand, Amelia was already walking toward them. She never raised her voice. "Boys." All 3 turned. "I think that book belongs to her." "We were just joking," one of them muttered. "I know." Her smile never disappeared. "But jokes are only funny when everyone laughs." The boys exchanged uneasy glances. Instead of scolding them in front of everyone, Amelia picked up another novel from a nearby display and handed it to the tallest boy. "I remember you borrowed the first book in this series." He blinked in surprise. "You remember that? I try to remember everyone who finishes a good book." The boy looked down at the novel before quietly handing the girl's book back. "Sorry." Within seconds, the confrontation ended. No shouting. No humiliation. Only a simple reminder to choose kindness. Damien had spent years negotiating peace between rival criminal organizations. Yet Amelia had resolved a conflict in less than a minute, using nothing but patience and respect. It fascinated him. As the weeks passed, their conversations became longer. Sometimes they discussed classic novels. Other times they debated history or shared recommendations for children's books. Amelia still believed Damien was an ordinary businessman with an unusual interest in libraries. She never imagined the quiet man sitting across from her controlled an empire worth billions. One afternoon, she noticed him staring at a colorful drawing hanging on the wall. "My nephew painted that," she said proudly. The picture showed a lighthouse standing against crashing waves. He says, "Lighthouses don't stop storms." Damien studied the drawing. "They help people find their way home." Amelia smiled. "Exactly." For a moment, neither of them spoke. It was a simple conversation. Yet Damien realized he looked forward to these ordinary moments more than the most successful business negotiations of his life. That same evening, Victor Romano watched Damien from the opposite end of the executive conference room. The boss seemed focused, calm, confident. But something had undeniably changed. After everyone else left, Victor summoned one of his most trusted captains. "I want every detail about the places Damien visits when he isn't here." "You still think someone's influencing him?" Victor's expression remained cold. "I don't believe in coincidences. If the most disciplined man I've ever known suddenly changes his routine." He looked toward the empty doorway. "Then someone has given him a reason." Victor folded his hands behind his back. "When I find that reason," his voice dropped to a whisper, I'll use it to destroy him. Miles away, Amelia locked the library doors at the end of another ordinary day, completely unaware that simply by showing kindness, she had already become the target of men who would stop at nothing to bring down the most powerful empire on the East Coast. By early December, Damian Moretti had become a familiar face inside the Boston Public Library. To Amelia, he was still nothing more than a quiet visitor who loved history books, never interrupted story hour, and somehow always appeared on Tuesdays and Thursdays. To Damian, however, every visit made it harder to leave. They talked about books, Boston's unpredictable weather, Noah's growing interest in robotics, and the children who filled the library with laughter every afternoon. Simple conversations. Normal conversations. The kind of life Damian had never allowed himself to imagine. One afternoon, Amelia noticed him studying a bulletin board covered with handwritten thank you cards from children. "They insist on making one after every reading program," she said with a smile. Damian stepped closer. One card read, "Thank you for making books feel like adventures." Another said, "Miss Amy always remembers my favorite stories." A third, written in shaky pencil, caught his attention. "Brave people help others, even when they're scared." He read the sentence twice. "You've changed a lot of lives." Amelia laughed softly. "I don't know about that. I think you do." She shook her head. "I believe people change each other through small acts." She carefully straightened one of the cards that had begun to curl at the corners. "We're usually just too busy to notice." The words stayed with Damian long after he left the library. That evening, Adrian Keller entered Damian's office, carrying another intelligence report. "Our surveillance confirms Victor has been meeting privately with several captains." Damian closed the folder after only a brief glance. "He'll make his move soon." "You sound certain." "He believes I've become distracted." Adrian studied him for a moment. "Weren't you?" Damian smiled faintly. "Maybe, but not enough to stop paying attention." He had already noticed every suspicious financial transfer and every missing shipment. Victor believed Damian had become emotionally vulnerable. In reality, Damian had simply stopped confusing fear with respect. This time, he wanted undeniable proof before acting. The following week, Amelia received an invitation she hadn't expected: the annual Whitmore Children's Education Gala. The Boston Public Library relied heavily on donations collected during the event to fund literacy programs. Normally, Amelia avoided formal charity galas. She never felt comfortable among wealthy donors who judged people by designer clothes and business connections. But the library director insisted. "The children trust you," Mrs. Henderson said warmly. "They deserve someone who can tell their stories honestly." Reluctantly, Amelia agreed. On the evening of the gala, she stood in front of the small mirror inside her apartment, smoothing the wrinkles from a navy blue dress borrowed from a coworker. It fit well enough. Noah adjusted his tie dramatically before giving her a grin. "You look amazing." She laughed. "You're legally required to say that." "I'm 12. He folded his arms proudly. "I'm legally required to tell the truth." She hugged him before leaving. "I'll be home before you know it. I'll be waiting." The Whitmore Grand Hotel glittered beneath crystal chandeliers and polished marble floors. Luxury cars lined the entrance, while photographers welcomed politicians, executives, and Boston's wealthiest families. Amelia immediately felt out of place. She quietly arranged photos of children's reading programs at the library's display table. Soon, several donors stopped to ask questions. Instead of discussing budgets, Amelia told stories. She spoke about a shy boy who had discovered confidence through books, a little girl who learned English during weekly story hour, families who visited the library because it was the only warm place they could spend time together without spending money. The conversations were genuine. Several guests appeared deeply moved. Not everyone appreciated the attention she was receiving. Across the ballroom, Catherine Whitmore, the elegant daughter of the hotel's founder, noticed more and more donors leaving her table to speak with the librarian. She walked over with a practiced smile. "You work for the public library, don't you?" "I do. Children's department." "Yes. How charming." Her tone suggested the opposite. She slowly looked Amelia up and down. "I'm surprised they couldn't find someone a little more polished to represent them." Several nearby guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Amelia answered calmly, "I'm only here to represent the children." Catherine smiled sweetly. "Of course." She gestured toward Amelia's borrowed dress. Still, some events have certain expectations. A few guests laughed quietly. The familiar sting of embarrassment returned. Amelia had heard comments about her appearance for years. Tonight, dozens of strangers were watching. Catherine leaned slightly closer. "Confidence is admirable." She paused. "But sometimes, it's kinder to admit when you simply don't belong." Silence settled over the group. Amelia lowered her eyes for only a second before looking back up. "I came because children deserve opportunities." Her voice remained steady. "If that's all people remember about me tonight." She smiled gently. "Then I'm satisfied." For the first time, Catherine had no immediate reply. Before anyone spoke again, the entire ballroom suddenly fell silent. Conversations stopped. Musicians lowered their instruments. Executives turned toward the entrance. Even Catherine instinctively stepped aside. Amelia frowned in confusion and slowly turned around. A tall man wearing a perfectly tailored black suit had just entered the ballroom. His calm expression alone commanded the attention of everyone present. Whispers spread rapidly through the room. "Damien Moretti. The chairman is here. The guest of honor." Amelia's heart skipped. She recognized him instantly. Not as Boston's most influential businessman, not as the powerful figure everyone suddenly seemed eager to impress. She recognized him as the quiet stranger from the rainy bus, as the man who spent peaceful mornings reading history books in her library. Damien paused just inside the entrance. Politicians, executives, and wealthy donors all waited for him to approach. Instead, he ignored every outstretched hand. His eyes searched the crowded ballroom until they found Amelia. Then, without hesitation, Damien Moretti walked straight toward the librarian everyone else had just tried to humiliate. Every conversation in the ballroom stopped as Damien Moretti crossed the polished marble floor. Powerful executives instinctively stepped aside. State senators lowered their glasses. Business leaders who had spent months hoping for a private meeting watched in stunned silence as the city's most influential man ignored every greeting. His destination was unmistakable. He stopped directly in front of Amelia. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Then Damien smiled. Not the polite smile expected at a public event. A genuine one. "I'm glad to see you again." Amelia blinked in surprise. "I didn't know you were coming." "Neither did I." A nervous laugh escaped her. "You clean up a lot better than you did on the bus." Damien chuckled softly. "So do you." She glanced down at the borrowed dress. "I don't think that's true." "I do." The sincerity in his voice caught her completely off guard. Around them, whispers spread across the ballroom. Does he know her? Who is she? Why is Damien Moretti talking to the librarian? Catherine Whitmore quickly stepped forward, forcing another elegant smile. "Mr. Moretti, everyone has been waiting to welcome you." Damien nodded politely. "I'm sure they have." She extended her hand. Instead of taking it immediately, Damien looked back at Amelia. "There is someone I need to thank first." The room became silent again. He turned fully toward Amelia. "A few weeks ago, after one of the hardest days of my life," he paused, "a complete stranger offered me half of her only sandwich. Confused expressions appeared throughout the ballroom. Damien continued. She didn't know my name. She didn't know what I owned. She didn't know whether I could ever repay her. She simply believed another person needed kindness more than she needed comfort. His eyes never left Amelia. I've received gifts worth millions. I've been offered companies, political favors, and fortunes. But nothing anyone has ever given me has meant more than that simple act. Amelia looked at him in disbelief. I never thought you'd even remember. I couldn't forget. Damien slowly reached inside his jacket. From a slim leather holder, he unfolded a carefully preserved paper napkin, the same napkin that had wrapped half of Amelia's sandwich. She covered her mouth in surprise. You kept it? I've carried it every day. The ballroom fell completely silent. Only moments earlier, people had mocked Amelia's appearance. Now they were watching one of the most respected men in Boston carefully protect the wrapper from an ordinary sandwich, as though it were priceless. For the first time all evening, no one looked at Amelia because of her clothes. They looked at her because of the respect shining in Damien's eyes. An elderly donor slowly began to applaud. Another joined. Within seconds, the entire ballroom erupted into applause. Not because Damien had asked for it, because gratitude like this couldn't be staged. Mrs. Henderson quietly wiped away tears. I always knew she was special. One of the foundation's largest donors approached Amelia. I've supported children's charities for 20 years. He smiled warmly. I've never met anyone who represents one better. Another couple stepped forward. We'd like to sponsor the library's reading program. A third donor added, we'll replace every damaged children's book. Within minutes, volunteers rushed to prepare new pledge forms as donations poured in from every corner of the ballroom. Amelia stood speechless. She had come, hoping to raise enough money to keep Story Hour running through the winter. Instead, the library had received more support in a single evening than anyone had imagined. She looked at Damien. You didn't have to do this. I know. Then why? He answered without hesitation. Because kindness deserves to be seen. Amelia smiled, her eyes glistening. For the first time in years, someone had defended her without expecting anything in return. High above the ballroom, another pair of eyes had witnessed everything. Victor Romano stood on the second-floor balcony, watching silently. He had attended the gala as a representative of Moretti Shipping's charitable foundation. Until this moment, he believed Damien's recent absences were connected to business. Now he finally understood. His boss wasn't protecting a financial secret. He was protecting a woman. One of Victor's trusted captains stepped beside him. Should we be worried? Victor never looked away from Amelia. Very. The boss has finally given us something he can't afford to lose. His expression grew colder. A man who fears nothing is almost impossible to defeat. He paused. But a man with someone to protect, a faint smile appeared, becomes predictable. Without another word, Victor turned and disappeared into the crowd. The first move against Damien Moretti had already begun. Neither Damien nor Amelia realized that the kindness which had brought them together had also placed a target on both their lives. Outside the hotel, snow began to fall over Boston. Amelia waited beneath the entrance canopy for her rideshare. Damien walked beside her. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, Amelia smiled. I think tonight may have been the strangest night of my life. Damien laughed quietly. It ranks pretty high on mine, too. She studied him curiously. I still don't really know what you do. He hesitated, then answered carefully. I work in shipping. Technically, it wasn't a lie. She nodded. It must be an important job. It keeps me busy. A car pulled up to the curb. Before opening the door, Amelia turned back. I'm glad you accepted the sandwich. Damien smiled. So am I. She hesitated for only a second. You smile a lot more now than you did that day on the bus." For the first time in many years, Damien realized she was right. He did. Amelia climbed into the car and disappeared into the snowy night. Damien remained standing on the sidewalk long after the taillights vanished. He didn't know that Victor had already started searching for every detail about Amelia Brooks. He only knew one thing. The woman who had once shared half of her dinner with a stranger had quietly become the most important person in his life. And before Christmas arrived, both of them would be forced to choose between safety and the future they were only beginning to imagine.
The call came just after sunrise. Adrian Keller entered Damien Moretti's office without knocking, his face grimmer than Damien had ever seen. "They've made their move." Damien looked up instantly. "Victor?" Adrian nodded. "He disappeared overnight." "What does he want?" Without a word, Adrian placed a photograph on the desk. Damien's expression froze. It was Noah Brooks. The picture had been taken outside his middle school the previous afternoon. He was taken less than 20 minutes ago. For the first time in years, Damien felt fear before anger. Across the city, Amelia stood outside Noah's school surrounded by police officers. His backpack had been found near a neighborhood park. No witnesses, no ransom demand, no explanation. "This has to be a mistake," she whispered, desperately dialing Noah's phone again. "It can't be Noah." The call went straight to voicemail. She was barely able to breathe. Moments later, a black sedan pulled quietly to the curb. Adrian stepped out. "Miss Brooks." She recognized him from the charity gala. "You know where Noah is?" "I believe I know who took him." "Then call the police." His expression remained calm but urgent. "This isn't an ordinary kidnapping." He opened the rear door. "If we lose any more time, your nephew may not survive." After one painful glance toward the school, Amelia climbed into the car. The drive felt endless. Finally, Amelia broke the silence. "Who is Damien?" Adrian hesitated. "You deserve the truth." "He owns shipping companies." "I already knew that." He looked out the window before continuing. "That's only the part the public knows. The rest? He leads an organization powerful enough that most criminals on the East Coast avoid speaking his name." Amelia stared at him. "You're saying?" Adrian nodded. "Everything you've heard about Damien Moretti's influence is true." Her mind raced back through every quiet conversation inside the library. The history books, the children's drawings, the sandwich. The man she believed was an ordinary businessman had never truly been ordinary. Yet none of those moments had been fake. He had simply hidden the most dangerous part of his life. The convoy entered a heavily guarded waterfront warehouse. Rows of black SUVs filled the parking lot. Armed security teams moved with military precision. A helicopter circled overhead. The moment Damien stepped inside, every conversation stopped. More than 30 men stood waiting. No one spoke until he did. "Seal every road leading out of the city. Search every warehouse, dock, and abandoned property connected to Victor Romano. I want Noah found alive. Nothing else matters." Orders spread through the room within seconds. Amelia watched in stunned silence. She had never seen people obey someone with such absolute loyalty, or such fear. She turned slowly toward Adrian. "So, it's all true," he answered quietly. "Yes." Her eyes found Damien across the room. For the first time since they met, she wasn't looking at the gentleman from the library. She was looking at the leader everyone else feared. Damien walked toward her. "I'm sorry. You lied to me. I hid the truth." "That's the same thing." Pain flashed across his face, but before he could answer, Adrian's secure phone rang. Victor Romano. The call was placed on speaker. Victor's calm voice echoed through the warehouse. You finally understand why I chose the boy. Damien's expression never changed. What do you want? You think I want your empire? Victor laughed softly. No. Empires can be rebuilt. But today, I want you to lose the only person you've ever chosen over power. The call ended. A secure message appeared on Damien's phone. Coordinates. An abandoned shipyard outside Boston. Everyone knew it was a trap. Adrian looked at Damien. It could be suicide. Damien slipped the phone into his pocket. So be it. He turned toward Amelia. I'll bring Noah home. She stepped directly in front of him. No. He frowned. This isn't your responsibility. It became my responsibility the day I allowed you into my life. For the first time, Damien lowered every wall he had built over decades. I never wanted my world to touch yours. I should have stayed away. I'm sorry. The word stunned Amelia more than anything else. This wasn't the ruthless businessman newspapers whispered about. This was simply a man blaming himself for the danger surrounding the people he cared about. Less than an hour later, the rescue operation was over. Gunfire echoed through the abandoned shipyard. Victor's men scattered as Damien's security teams closed in from every direction. Noah was found unharmed inside a locked storage building, terrified, but alive. Victor Romano escaped into the darkness, leaving behind the shattered remains of his conspiracy. By dawn, every major traitor inside the Moretti organization had either surrendered or disappeared. The empire had survived, but victory felt hollow. Outside the medical clinic where Noah was examined, Amelia wrapped her arms tightly around her nephew. She cried with relief as he promised he was all right. Only after Noah was safely inside did she turn back toward Damien. Tears still filled her eyes. I'll always be grateful for what you did. He already knew what was coming. But I can't raise Noah in a world where every goodbye might be our last. Damien closed his eyes briefly. I understand. I wanted this to work. So did I. But Noah has already lost enough family. He nodded slowly. There was nothing left to say. Real love sometimes meant accepting the choice that hurt the most. Noah looked back before getting into the car. Will I ever see you again? Damien forced a small smile. I hope so. The car pulled away. Damien remained standing, alone beneath the pale morning sky. For the second time in his life, he felt completely powerless. Not because he had nearly lost his empire, but because the only woman who had ever seen the man behind his name had chosen to walk away in order to protect the child she loved most. 6 months later, spring returned to Boston. The snow had disappeared, replaced by warm sunlight pouring through the tall windows of the Boston Public Library. Inside the children's reading room, life seemed wonderfully ordinary. Amelia Brooks still welcomed children every Saturday morning with the same warm smile. Noah, now noticeably taller, volunteered before every reading session, helping younger children find books and carry stacks of picture novels. To everyone else, nothing had changed. Only Amelia knew how often she still thought about the man she had walked away from. She had never regretted choosing Noah. She never would. But there wasn't a single day when she didn't wonder whether she had also left behind the only person who had truly seen her worth. Across the city, Damien Moretti's life had changed just as dramatically. Victor Romano's remaining supporters had been eliminated from the organization, and for the first time in decades, Damien stepped away from many of the empire's darker operations. Legitimate executives now managed most of the shipping company, while Damien focused on rebuilding the businesses that operated within the law. One afternoon, Adrian Keller noticed another meeting disappear from Damien's calendar. You've delegated almost everything. Damien looked up from his desk. I've learned that controlling everything isn't the same as protecting what matters. Adrian smiled. She changed you? Damien looked toward the leather case, resting on a nearby shelf. Inside was the folded paper napkin he had carried every day since the rainy bus ride. No, he replied quietly. She reminded me who I wanted to become. Several weeks later, Mrs. Henderson hurried into Amelia's office carrying an official envelope. I think you'd better read this. Amelia opened it. Her eyes widened. The Boston Public Library had received the largest private endowment in its history. The funding would expand children's literacy programs across Massachusetts, create mobile libraries for underserved neighborhoods, renovate aging reading rooms, and provide thousands of free books every year. There was only one condition. The donor wished to remain anonymous until the spring literacy gala. Unlike the luxurious hotel where they had met months earlier, this year's gala was held inside the restored central hall of the library itself. There were no politicians competing for attention, no celebrities posing for cameras, only teachers, volunteers, parents, librarians, and children. Amelia immediately felt at home. She stood near the stage, speaking with families when Mrs. Henderson stepped to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, there is one person our guest wishes to recognize before revealing tonight's donor. She smiled toward Amelia. Would you please join me? Confused applause filled the hall as Amelia walked onto the stage. She expected flowers, perhaps a certificate. Nothing more. Instead, the doors at the back of the hall slowly opened. Damien Moretti entered alone. No bodyguards, no assistants, no entourage. For the first time since Amelia had met him, he looked exactly like the quiet man from the bus. He stopped beside her. Neither spoke for several seconds. Finally, Damien reached into his jacket and unfolded the familiar paper napkin. Soft murmurs spread through the audience. I've carried this every day, he said. Most people see an old napkin. I see the day someone reminded me that kindness asks for nothing in return. He turned toward the audience. People often believe life-changing moments happen inside boardrooms, or during business deals, or through power. He shook his head. The moment that changed my life happened on a crowded city bus. He looked at Amelia. A woman who had almost nothing decided she still had enough to share. The room became completely silent. That single act forced me to ask myself a question. If a stranger could choose kindness over fear, why couldn't I? He smiled. Everything that followed began with half of a sandwich. Many guests quietly wiped away tears. Damien nodded toward the large screen behind the stage. The library's logo faded away. A new image appeared. The Amelia Brooks Children's Literacy Foundation. Gasps echoed throughout the hall. Damien continued. This foundation will provide books, scholarships, mobile libraries, and literacy programs for children across Massachusetts. It won't carry my name. It will carry hers. Amelia stared at him, speechless. You shouldn't have done this. He smiled gently. I didn't create it because you helped me. I created it because thousands of children deserve someone like you. The audience rose to its feet. The applause continued for nearly a minute, not because of Damien's wealth, not because of the donation, but because everyone understood that genuine kindness had inspired something far greater than money. After the ceremony ended, guests slowly drifted outside into the warm spring evening. Children laughed on the library steps, while parents gathered around the new book displays funded by the foundation. Damien stood quietly beneath one of the flowering trees. Amelia walked toward him. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, she broke the silence. I was afraid. I know. I wasn't afraid of you. She looked into his eyes. I was afraid of losing the people I love. Damien nodded. So I changed my life. She searched his face. You really did. I couldn't ask you to trust promises. So I chose to give you proof. He looked toward Noah, who was laughing with several children nearby. I don't want you to choose between him and me. I never should have asked you to. Emotion filled Amelia's eyes. You didn't. You simply gave me a reason to hope. Before either of them could say another word, Noah jogged over with a grin. I've been pretending not to watch you two for almost 5 minutes. Amelia laughed through her tears. You're terrible. I learned from the best. He turned toward Damien. So, does this mean you'll finally come to one of our Saturday reading programs instead of secretly hiding in the history section? Damien laughed. I suppose my disguise doesn't work anymore. Nope. Noah held out his hand. Welcome to the family reading club. Damien shook it with a smile. I'd be honored. Noah ran back toward his friends. Amelia watched him go before quietly slipping her hand into Damien's. This time, neither of them pulled away. Together they walked toward the library entrance, where dozens of children were already waiting for the next story to begin. Months earlier, one exhausted librarian had shared half of her only sandwich with a stranger. She believed she was giving away a simple meal. Instead, she had unknowingly changed a man's heart, transformed countless children's futures, and found a love built not on power or wealth, but on kindness. And this time, when they stepped through the library doors together, both of them knew they were finally walking toward the same future.